So what we have today is what I would call an inconvenient scripture. It's one of those that sometimes I dodge it because it says something that I just don't want to fight that, I don't want to deal with that, I don't want to talk about that, and yet I know that as a minister, and indeed all of us as Christians, we should be able to face the scripture and deal with it, to try to dig into it and have some understanding of it. So let me share with you today's scripture, taken from the lectionary, but I don't think I should be dodging scripture. So, it's from John chapter 2. On the third day there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Now both Jesus and his disciples were invited to the wedding. And when they ran out of wine, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does your concern have to do with me? My hour is not yet come." And his mother said to the servants, "Whatever he says to you, do that." Now there were 6 water pots of stone, according to the manner of purification of the Jews, containing 20 or 30 gallons apiece. Jesus said to them, "Fill the water pots with water," and they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Draw out some now and take it to the master of the feast." And they took it. When the master of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine, and did not know where it came from, but the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called to the bridegroom. And he said to him, "Every man at the beginning sets out good wine, and when the guests have well drunk, then the inferior. You have kept the good wine until now." This beginning of signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee, and manifest his glory, and his disciples believed in him. May God add God's blessing to this reading of the Word. The book of John, the first 11 chapters are sometimes called the book of signs because in contrast to the other Gospels, John selected 7 specific miracles that Jesus did and used those to show the deity of Jesus Christ. That's the big focus of the book of John, is the deity of Jesus Christ. He turned the water into wine. He healed the official's son in Capernaum. He healed the paralytic in Bethesda. He fed 5,000. He walked on water. He healed the man who was blind from birth, and finally rose Lazarus from the dead. Each of these says something about Jesus. Now, this one I say it's inconvenient because, as we discussed before, at the last church I served, we had Celebrate Recovery, which is recovery from alcoholism and drug addiction. It's a serious problem in South Florida, and so we try to give people a religious program that helps them to address it. And therefore, it would be a lot more convenient to me if Jesus had stayed away from wine. And what that tells me, well, what does it tell me about Jesus? It tells me about Jesus that he's not a stick in the mud. Maybe I am. See, now I don't want to encourage anyone to be drinking. I don't want to encourage that. I know that some of us should avoid it. Some of us are okay with it. But we have this tendency, some of us, particularly very religious people, which many of us are, we want to be holier than Jesus. You want to be holier than Jesus. You want to be a super Christian. Like what's an example of this? A super Christian, for instance, doesn't dance because dancing is tempting. A super Christian never cusses. A good Christian can drink wine, but a super Christian never drinks wine. A good Christian can go to church on Sunday morning, but a super Christian goes every Sunday night too. A good Christian is generous with their money, but a super Christian gives away everything they got. We think there's some kind of hierarchy of Christians, and when we start looking at the high end of it, we need to look back at Jesus, because the truth is you're not going to be holier than Jesus. We're not going to be that. And so we look at Jesus, and when our view of holiness goes beyond what Jesus would accept, then we have to redefine holiness. Here's a good example. There are churches, some of you know of them, there are individual churches, there are entire denominations. that practice shunning. When somebody has left their church, or when a family member fails to adhere to their church, then they will practice shunning. They will literally cut that person off. They won't speak to them. They won't invite them over. They won't dine with them. This is family members we're talking about that suffer from shunning. Now, they think that there are scriptures that say we should hang with the right kind of people and we shouldn't hang with the wrong kind of people. There's scriptures that say that, and it's true. You know, we should hang with people that, you know, bad company, what do they, corrupt company corrupts entirely, or something like that. One bad apple spoils the barrel. But what did Jesus do? Jesus did not shun. Jesus did not stay away. Jesus was not endorsing that. There's something wrong with that. Shunning is not holy. Oh, well, super Christians, well, but we're serious about this, but we're diehard. You know, no, they're not a member of our church, and therefore we don't have anything to do with those people. Oh, they're not even Christians. We don't have anything to do with those people. That is not the example that Jesus gave us. You can't be holier than Jesus. You may recall that the Pharisees were always talking about this. The Pharisees were always bothering Jesus about this. The woman comes in and washes Jesus' feet with her hair. And they say, oh, if he knew what kind of sinner this woman was, he wouldn't even let her touch him. Jesus either wasn't that holy, or that had nothing to do with holiness. That was one of these things where he would probably say, you're teaching the commandments of men and treating them like they were the laws of God. That example comes up when the disciples are walking through a field, and as what the law allowed, they were taking heads of grain and chucking them and eating them. And why don't you let your disciples do that which is not lawful on the Sabbath day? Well, there's nothing illegal about eating on the Sabbath day. Or the time that they said, why is it that your disciples don't wash their hands before they eat, or don't do the ceremonial washing of hands? It says because the people of that day were always really big on washing their pots and pans and their hands and everything. And he said, that's when he said, you know, you're criticizing people for something that's not wrong. Super Christian. What does a super Christian do? A super Christian, does that mean that if I mostly hang with the right people, would you say a super Christian always hangs with the right people? No. That's not true. Or, I don't drink. It so happens I don't drink because I feel like as a minister of the gospel that I know there are some people who simply cannot drink. And I don't want to be their excuse for drinking. Paul talked about this. He said, some people eat only vegetables and others can eat meat. Let each be satisfied in their own minds. He said, but I will not do anything that causes a brother to sin. The example that Paul gives us is that in his day, people were eating meat that had been sacrificed to idols. It was no big deal. As far as Paul was concerned, you go down the back alley, in the front of the temple, there are people bringing the sacrifices, and out back, they're selling it in the meat market. And Paul said, don't even ask if it's a good cut of meat. Buy it and eat it, you know. No big deal. He said the idol is nothing. But he went on to say, but if your brother or sister thinks that it's a sin, then for them it is a sin. And if you're invited to eat and then by somebody, and this was somebody who's not a Christian, somebody who was a pagan worshiping person, or somebody, a Greek or whatever, you go to that home and you're eating, he says, and whatever's set before you, eat it and be grateful for it. But if the host says, this was sacrificed to an idol, and your brother has come with you, and he said, we can't eat this, it's been sacrificed to an idol, then the correct thing for you to do is to turn it down. Say, no, I'm sorry, my brother's offended if we eat something that's sacrificed to idols. So, with all due respect, sir, we're going to pass on that particular dish. This is what you do. Even though the idol, the food sacrificed to idol is nothing, because the idol is nothing. It doesn't mean anything. If it means nothing to you, then then go ahead. But if it means something to you, then it matters. And if it means something to your brother or sister, then it matters. It becomes important. See what I'm saying? I'm saying it's like somebody would have tried to tell him, oh, well, I mean, as a matter of fact, people were telling him, well, a super Christian keeps all of the Jewish laws. And Paul said, no, that doesn't matter. A super Christian would never eat anything offered to idols. Well, no, that's not true. It's not true that they would never eat something offered to idols. That's not the sign of a superior Christian. They would really say that was the sign of a Pharisee, of a lawkeeper, of somebody who thinks that the point is the laws that we keep and the rules that we follow. When we know that the point is really the love that we have for God as expressed by the love that we have for Jesus Christ as revealed by the love that we have for one another. See, Jesus didn't say, I want you to be a super Christian, because he didn't use the word Christian anyway. But Jesus didn't say, I want you to be a super Christian, and yet Jesus did say, be perfect. Well, wait a minute, Jesus. You're hanging with people that eat with unwashed hands, and you're letting women, strange women, come in and wash your feet with their hair, and you're walking through this evil place called Samaria, and you're helping centurions, and you're helping lepers who are Gentiles. What are you doing, Jesus? You're telling us to be holy. You're not holy enough, Jesus. You can't do this on the Sabbath day. You can't heal people on the Sabbath day. And Jesus would say, you don't understand holiness. And yet he turns to us and says, be perfect. And we always say, oh, well, that's just something he said. That's just a throwaway, because, of course, nobody can be perfect. Only Jesus is perfect. Well, maybe as we have to pay attention to what does Jesus mean by holy, we should pay attention to what does Jesus mean by perfect. Let's look at that. Look at Matthew. It's in chapter 5. Verses 43 to 48. Jesus speaking here. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be sons and daughters of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward have you? Do not even tax collectors do the same? If you greet your brothers only, what do you do more than others? Do not even tax collectors do so? Therefore, you shall be perfect, just as your Father in heaven is perfect. Perfect in the sense that God is perfect. Perfect just as the Father is perfect. Well, what is this perfection that we're getting from God? What is this perfection? Causes the rain to fall on the evil and the good alike. God is generous to all. God is not playing favorites. God is not holding one kind of person above another. God is not waiting for you to come to the correct way of thinking. God pours his blessings out on everyone. See, as Christians, it's never about withholding love. Never. It's about sharing. It's about giving. It's about being. It's about being perfect. Even as your Father in heaven is perfect, and he describes what it is, what the way in which he wants us to be like our Father in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust. We cannot be holier than Jesus. But we really should focus on what does Jesus mean by holy. And maybe we can't be perfect by our own standards, but we really need to look at what does Jesus mean by perfect. Be perfect, even as your Father in heaven